Jung's warning was not poetry, it was prophecy. And if you are an empath, it was written for you. Because the very gift that makes you radiant is the same gift that can leave you prey. You feel too much. You carry what is not yours. And in your silence, others feed. How many times have you felt your body heavy after a conversation, as if someone siphoned your energy without asking? How often do you call it compassion, when in truth it is consumption? And how many times have you mistaken being needed for being loved? The danger is subtle. You do not lose yourself all at once. You give in fragments, a listening ear here, a sleepless night there, the constant willingness to absorb what others refuse to face. They leave lighter, you leave dimmer. And yet you call it kindness, but is it? Or is it the slow draining of your life force dressed in the costume of virtue? Jung's warning remains. What you refuse to confront in yourself, others will exploit. So the question is not whether you have light. You do. The question is, will you keep letting others feed on it until nothing remains, or will you finally learn to guard the very gift that makes you who you are? And isn't that the real test of empathy? To shine without being consumed. Empathy is a gift, but it is also a risk. To feel what others feel is to open your soul like an unlocked door. And not everyone who enters has good intentions. Some take your presence as permission to pour their shadows into you. Some see your light not as beauty, but as fuel. They do not even always know they are feeding, but you feel it in your bones when they leave. How many times have you noticed that after spending time with certain people, you feel emptied, anxious, or strangely guilty, even though nothing in the interaction seemed wrong? How often do you find yourself carrying their moods, their problems, their despair, as if they had slipped them into your hands without asking? And how many times have you told yourself it was your role, your responsibility, your calling to bear the weight of others? Jung saw this danger clearly. For him, the problem was not empathy itself, but unconscious empathy. When you do not see the shadow behind your virtue, you confuse giving with self-betrayal. You think you are helping when in truth you are only enabling, keeping others weak while silently making yourself sick. Your compassion becomes their nourishment and your soul their banquet. This is the tension Jung's final warning points to the empath who has not yet learned boundaries. Becomes a candle burning at both ends. You shine brilliantly, but you do not last. You comfort others, but you collapse yourself. And in the end, what is the use of a light that has been consumed before it ever had the chance to fulfill its purpose? The world does not need your martyrdom. It needs your clarity. The gift of empathy is not to lose yourself in others, but to guide them without drowning with them. Yet you must ask, are you willing to see when your help is really harm? Are you willing to admit that sometimes protecting your light is the most loving thing you can do? Because until you do, you will keep mistaking exhaustion for virtue. You will keep mistaking weakness for kindness. And you will keep feeding those who refuse to feed themselves. The real question is, when will you finally draw the line, not to stop shining, but to ensure your light is never stolen again? The greatest danger to the empath is not cruelty, it is goodness, goodness worn as a mask. For it is not the obvious villains who drain you the most. It is the people who appeal to your compassion, who clothe their demands in weakness, who use the language of need as a weapon. They may never shout, never threaten, never demand. Instead, they sigh, they lean. They present themselves as fragile, and you, feeling their pain, mistake the act of carrying them for love. But ask yourself, is it love if it costs you your sanity? Is it kindness if it leaves you bitter, depleted, and resentful? Is it virtue if it allows another to escape the work they must face themselves? Jung warned that every light hides a shadow, and in you, the shadow of empathy, is this the desire to be needed, even at the expense of being whole? You cloak it in virtue, but underneath is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being worthless unless someone else depends on you. This is how your light becomes their meal. Because the mask of virtue tells you, I must never say no. The mask whispers, if I draw boundaries, I am selfish. The mask insists, if I stop giving, I will stop being loved. And so you keep shining into the mouths of others until you are nothing but smoke. Yet deep down, you know this is not sustainable. How many times have you collapsed after a helpful conversation, unable to explain why you feel worse than the one you helped? How many times have you felt guilty for even daring to want space, rest, or silence? And how many times have you ignored the quiet truth inside that real compassion cannot exist without self-respect? The dark side of virtue is not easy to face. It means admitting that part of your selfless giving is not selfless at all. It is a strategy. You give in order to be accepted. You help in order to be seen. You exhaust yourself in order to avoid abandonment. And the cruel irony is that those you save often resent you because they sense, even if unconsciously, that your help carries the hidden weight of expectation. Jung called this the shadow, the part of yourself you refuse to admit, the motives you disguise as morality. For the empath, the shadow wears the robes of a saint, but behind them stands the terrified child who believes, I will only be loved if I disappear into others. Until you face that child, until you call out that illusion, you will keep attracting those who exploit it. The mask is dangerous, not because it is false, but because it is partial. You do care, you do feel deeply. But when you refuse to see the fear underneath, you mistake collapse for love and slavery for service. You offer what you do not have to give, and then call your emptiness sacrifice. So the question becomes, what if you dared to drop the mask? What if you said no, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity? What if you let others carry their own weight, even if it meant they accused you of being cold? What if you stopped proving your goodness and started protecting your soul? The paradox is this: the moment you take off the mask, your empathy becomes real. Because now it is no longer a bargain. Now it is no longer poisoned by fear. Now it is given freely, not out of desperation to be loved, but out of strength that does not need to be drained in order to exist. But first, you must ask, where in your life are you hiding behind the mask of goodness? Who have you been rescuing to avoid rescuing yourself? And when will you admit that sometimes what you call love is really fear dressed in virtue's clothing? Until you confront that shadow, your light will keep feeding others while starving you. But once you name it, once you see that your virtue can be a mask, you begin to glimpse the truth Jung left as his final warning to protect your empathy. You must first strip away the illusions that make you prey. Only then does your light stop being food for others and start becoming fire for yourself. Jung taught that what you refuse to see in yourself will rule you from the shadows. For the empath, this truth carries a double edge. You shine brightly, but you also hide deeply. Your compassion, your attentiveness, your willingness to give, these are not lies, they are gifts. But without the courage to see what fuels them, they become traps. The shadow lives here in the unspoken bargain behind your generosity, in the hunger for validation behind your sacrifice, in the fear of abandonment beneath your constant yes. So the first foundation is this: the shadow. Jung called it the dark side of the personality. It contains all that you repress: anger, selfishness, pride, envy, rage, but also all the power you've denied yourself. Every time you silence your anger to keep the peace, every time you swallow your truth so someone else won't leave, are pushing more of yourself into the shadow. And the paradox is that the more you push away, the more others seem to take. Can you see how this works? By refusing to own your darkness, you hand it to the world, and it comes back to you in the form of exploitation. The second foundation is projection. Jung taught that what you will not claim in yourself, you project onto others. That is why you are drawn to the broken, the weak, the needy. You see in them what you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. Their fragility mirrors your own denied fragility. Their helplessness echoes the child in you that you still disown. And so you give endlessly, hoping that by rescuing them, you will unconsciously rescue yourself. But this is a lie. Can you admit that? Can you see how your help is often an attempt to solve in them what you fear facing in your own soul? The third foundation is individuation. For Jung, the ultimate task of life is wholeness. To individuate is to integrate not only the bright qualities that win approval, but the darker impulses you fear. Until you integrate, you remain divided. One part of you shines, the other starves. One part of you rescues, the other collapses. One part of you gives, the other resents. Integration means facing the shadow directly, naming your anger, admitting your need, embracing your power, and no longer hiding behind the mask of virtue. Without this step, your empathy will always be hijacked by those who sense your fracture. The fourth foundation is boundaries. Jung saw that psychic health requires limits. Without boundaries, you are porous, absorbing everything around you, unable to tell where you end and others begin. This is why you feel exhausted after being with certain people. This is why their moods become yours, their pain becomes yours, their chaos enters your bloodstream as if it were your own. But is it truly compassion to carry what is not yours? Or is it a refusal to stand firm in your own skin? Jung's insight here was simple. Until you define yourself, others will define you and feed on you. The final foundation is responsibility. To guard your light is not cruelty, it is courage. To say no when others expect yes is not selfishness, it is sanity. To refuse to rescue someone from consequences they need to face is not abandonment, it is respect for them and for yourself. But will you claim this responsibility? Will you stop excusing your exhaustion as love? Will you stop calling your collapse kindness? Will you take responsibility for guarding the fire in you so that it can keep burning without being consumed? Jung's philosophy was never about comfort, it was about confrontation. He asked you to see what you fear, to touch what you despise, to integrate what you reject. For the empath, this means daring to admit that your light is not infinite and that your shadow is not evil. It is energy waiting to be claimed. And until you do, you will remain at the mercy of those who know, consciously or unconsciously, how to drink from you. So the question now is unavoidable. Will you keep hiding behind the mask of virtue, pretending you are endlessly strong, endlessly giving, endlessly fine? Or will you begin the harder work Jung demanded, the work of meeting your shadow, owning your projection, setting your boundaries, and stepping into individuation? Because until you do, your empathy will remain a wound disguised as a gift. But once you do, your empathy becomes what it was always meant to be, not food for others, but fire for yourself and light for yourself. To understand why people feed on your light, you must trace the roots back into the soil of your own psyche. This is where Jung's final warning to empaths comes alive, not as a moral lecture, but as a map of cause and effect. Why do others drain you? Why do you keep letting them? Why does your empathy so often become your weakness instead of your strength? These are not random misfortunes. They are the fruit of deeper roots planted long before you were conscious of them. The first root is unresolved shadow. You were taught that anger is dangerous, pride is sinful, selfishness is shameful. So you buried them. You buried them so deeply that you forgot you had them at all. But energy does not disappear. it only changes form. Every piece of yourself that you repress becomes a hook for others to pull. If you refuse to own your anger, you will attract those who provoke it. If you deny your selfishness, you will draw the endlessly needy. If you hide your pride, you will be drawn to those who exploit your humility. Do you see how this works? What you push down in yourself becomes the very energy that keeps pulling the wrong people in. The second root is projection. You meet someone broken and feel an irresistible pull to fix them. You tell yourself it is compassion, but in truth, it is your own unhealed wounds reflected back to you. You see in them the lost child, the abandoned self, the rejected part of you. And instead of facing it in your own soul, you try to heal it in theirs. But here lies the trap. They cannot carry what is yours, and you cannot carry what theirs. By projecting, you become enslaved to their struggle while neglecting your own. Can you see how rejection of self feeds dependence of others? The third root is fear of abandonment. Somewhere in you lives the terror that if you stop giving, you will stop being loved. So you give past exhaustion. You say yes when everything in you screams no. You carry burdens that aren't yours because to put them down feels like risking rejection. But what kind of love is it if it demands your collapse? What kind of bond survives only when you disappear? This fear is not truth. It is memory, often planted in childhood. Yet, until you confront it, you will keep mistaking exploitation for love. The fourth root is boundarylessness. Jung saw that the empath without boundaries is like a house without walls. Anyone can enter, take what they wish, and leave you hollow. You merge too easily. Their pain feels like your pain. Their chaos floods your calm. And because you confuse absorption with compassion, you forget that true empathy requires strength, not collapse. Can you see that? To carry another's burden without losing your own ground is power. To collapse under it is self-abandonment disguised as love. The fifth root is identification with virtue. You pride yourself on being the giver, the healer, the one who never complains. And while these may look noble, they hide a deadly cost. You become attached to your identity as the good one. You fear that if you stop giving, you will stop being worthy. So you pour out even when you are empty. But who told you that your worth depended on depletion? Who taught you that love is earned only by sacrifice? And will you keep believing it even as it drains the very life out of you? The sixth root is unconscious contracts. You enter relationships not with clarity, but with silent bargains. If I give enough, you will love me. If I heal you, you will never leave. If I carry your pain, you will finally see me. These contracts are never spoken, but they rule your choices. And because the other person never agreed to them, they can never fulfill them. Instead, they take what you give and demand more while you are left resentful, starved, and invisible. Can you admit that these contracts are yours to break? The seventh root is refusal of individuation. Jung taught that the soul's calling is wholeness. But wholeness requires integration, owning your anger, your pride, your selfishness, your shadow. The empath who refuses this path chooses fragmentation instead. You split yourself into the light one and the dark one, pouring all your energy into maintaining the mask while leaving the shadow to others. This is why they feed on you, because you have disowned half your own soul, and they are only too happy to drink what you have abandoned. When you see these roots clearly, the mechanism is no longer mysterious. You are not cursed. You are not doomed to be drained forever. You are simply living out the consequences of unclaimed parts of yourself. And once you claim them, the dynamic shifts. When you own your anger, manipulators can no longer provoke it. When you admit your selfishness, you no longer fear setting limits. When you integrate your pride, you no longer let others diminish you. The very energy that once made you prey becomes the strength that makes you whole. So ask yourself now, which root has you bound? Is it the fear of being abandoned? The hunger to rescue? The addiction to being seen as good? The absence of boundaries? Or is it the deeper refusal to own your shadow and walk into individuation? Until you answer, you will keep living the same story. The empath, drained, the light, consumed, the soul, exhausted. But once you answer, once you face the roots, you begin to rise. Because the truth is simple. People can only feed on you if you refuse to feed yourself. They can only drain your light if you refuse to guard it. They can only use your empathy if you mistake collapse for compassion. And isn't it time to stop mistaking chains for love, exhaustion for kindness, and depletion for virtue? The mechanism is not outside you, it is inside you. And until you face it, the warning Jung gave remains. Your light will keep feeding others until nothing remains. But once you face it, once you claim your shadow, once you break the contracts, once you root yourself in boundaries, your light stops being food. It becomes fire. Fire to guide you, fire to protect you, and fire that no one can ever steal again. So how do you stop your empathy from being consumed? How do you turn it from food for others into fire for yourself? Jung's warning is clear, but his path is practical. If you want to stop being drained, you cannot simply hope for it. You must train for it. 5 practices stand before you like gates, each one a choice to live differently, each one a refusal to be prey. Will you walk through them? Practice 1. Naming the shadow. The first practice is honesty. You cannot guard your light if you keep denying your dark. What qualities in yourself do you most despise? Which emotions do you keep calling bad? Anger, jealousy, selfishness, pride. Until you name them, they will rule you from the dark. And worse, they will make you an easy target. Because those who sense your unowned rage will keep provoking it, and those who sense your buried pride will keep exploiting your humility. Can you face the shame of naming these qualities? Can you hold them in the light without collapsing? Remember, the moment you name your shadow, it stops being your enemy. Practice 2. Confronting projection. The second practice is reclaiming your projections. Every time you feel an irresistible urge to rescue, pause and ask, who am I really trying to save? Is it them or the younger version of me that I keep abandoning? When you project, you give away your own energy and call it love. But projection is not love, it is escape. Can you dare to turn that rescue impulse inward? Can you care for your own wounded child as fiercely as you've cared for everyone else? Until you do, you will keep bleeding for others while starving yourself. Practice 3. Setting boundaries without guilt. The third practice is boundaries. Not whispered, not hesitant, but firm. You will be tested here because boundaries always trigger those who have benefited from your lack of them. They will call you cold. They will accuse you of selfishness. They will try to guilt you back into collapse. But whose life are you living? Theirs or yours? A boundary is not cruelty, it is clarity, and clarity is the soil of respect. Ask yourself, do I want to be loved for my absence or respected for my presence? Until you answer, you will keep mistaking exploitation for intimacy. Practice 4 rituals of renewal. The fourth practice is renewal. You cannot shine if you never recharge. You must create rituals that feed you, not occasionally, but daily. Silence, solitude, writing, walking, breath, prayer. Which of these do you honor? Which do you neglect? And why do you think your empathy will survive if you keep pouring without ever filling? Renewal is not luxury, it is survival. Without it, your light dims, and once again, you become food for others. With it, your light steadies, and no one can consume it. Practice 5. Choosing reciprocity. The fifth practice is discernment in relationship. Who feeds you as much as you feed them? who drains you no matter what you give, who rises when you rise and who collapses when you stand firm. Until you name these patterns, you will keep confusing leeches for lovers, parasites for friends, and dependence for intimacy. Reciprocity does not mean perfection. It means balance. It means you stop entering unconscious contracts where you give endlessly for scraps of recognition. It means you choose to walk with those who honor your fire, not those who extinguish it. Will you finally demand that your relationships give as much as they take? Together, these 5 practices form a shield. Without them, your empathy will remain an open wound, bleeding into every hand that reaches for it. With them, your empathy becomes strength, the kind of strength that shines without collapse, gives without depletion, and loves without losing itself. But each practice demands courage. Are you willing to name what you've buried? To reclaim what you've projected? To set boundaries that may cost you approval? To honor renewal even when the world calls it selfish? To choose reciprocity even if it means walking away from those who refuse it? Because here is the truth. Empathy without discipline is self-destruction, and empathy with discipline is power. Power not to dominate others, but to stand whole in yourself. Jung's warning to empaths was not to dim their light, but to stop mistaking self-betrayal for compassion, to stop being prey and start being whole. So I ask you now, which of these 5 gates will you walk through first? Which practice will you dare to claim today? Will you keep living drained, or will you begin to live disciplined? Will you keep shining for everyone else while starving yourself? Or will you finally guard your light as the sacred fire it has always been? Because the fire is yours, always has been. The only question is, will you let it burn for you, or will you keep letting others feed? Until nothing remains, Jung's final warning is not a threat, it is an invitation. To stop being prey, to stop confusing exhaustion with kindness, to stop calling collapse love. You were never asked to burn yourself to keep others warm. You were asked to carry a light, but that light was never meant to be consumed. It was meant to guide, to protect, to reveal. So ask yourself now, how much longer will you let them feed on what was never theirs? How much longer will you let guilt chain you to people who only take? How much longer will you keep betraying yourself in the name of compassion? Because every time you refuse to face your shadow, every time you refuse to set a boundary, every time you refuse to honor your own needs, you hand your light to those who cannot hold it. And once again, you starve. But when you claim your shadow, when you reclaim your projection, when you draw the line, when you renew yourself, when you choose reciprocity, you stop bleeding. You stop begging. You stop betraying yourself. And you finally discover what empathy was always meant to be. Not your downfall, but your strength. So the choice stands before you. Will you keep feeding others until nothing remains? Or will you rise into the disciplined fire of empathy that protects as fiercely as it gives? Because the world doesn't need another exhausted empath. It needs one who shines without collapse, one who loves without losing, one who stands in their own light, untouchable, unconsumable, whole. The final question is yours alone to answer. Will you keep living drained, or will you begin today to live disciplined?